Good evening, directors, student representatives, staff, and members of the public. I will now call this September 12, 2023 regular business meeting to order. We will begin tonight by acknowledging the buildings within Minneapolis Public Schools are located within the traditional homelands of the Dakota people. Minnesota comes from the Dakota name for this region, Minnesota Makoche, translating to the lands where the waters reflect the skies or cloudy waters. MPS recognizes the original people of this place and is committed to making ongoing efforts to educate the community about the relationship that the Dakota people have to this area, both historically and today, as they remain here in their homes. Thank you. Director Norville, will you please call the roll for the record?
Thank you, Chair. Director Abdi?
Here.
Director Firiari?
Here.
Director Cerrillo?
Present.
Director Norville? Here. Director Jourdain?
Here.
Director Beachy?
Here.
Director Ellison?
Present.
Director Emmerich?
Here.
Student Representative Abdullah? Student Representative Mohammed? Chair Elamine?
Present. Before we begin our meeting, I wanted to take a moment tonight here to recognize one of our pioneers within our community that recently just passed away. In our community, we lost Ms. Zulu. Ms. Zulu was a Black storyteller that has been in our community, that has touched so many of our lives, that has either been in the classrooms, in the community centers, around the neighborhood. And I think it's imperative that we take a moment to recognize the work that she has done, to give condolences to her family, and just again to recognize her love for education, her love for her community, her love for her culture. Again, if you had the opportunity to be in the presence of Ms. Zulu, she always lifted your spirits and had an energy that was able to bring us all together. So at this time, again, I want to give condolences to the Zulu family and for us to just maybe take a minute to remember the positive sides of Ms. Nathaniel Zulu. Again, thank you all, and our condolences to the family, and we look forward to the continued work with the Zulu family as well. We do have a quorum here tonight. Director Beachy, will you please move approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Our agenda has been moved and second. Is there any discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to approve the agenda say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. That motion carries and the agenda is adopted. Director Norville, can I please get a motion to approve the minutes before us?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Approval of the minutes for the August 8th regular business meetings have been moved and second. Any discussion or corrections? Seeing no further discussions or correction, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. That motion carried and the minutes are approved. Next, we will hear from those who have signed up to provide comments here tonight. As staff projects the list and our first speaker comes to the podium, I remind us all of the public comment guidelines. Our goal here is to hear from those who have signed up in a fair and respectful way. To do this, we ask each commentator to begin by stating their name, their relationship to MPS Public Schools, to keep comments within the 2-minute limit or 4 minutes if you are using an interpreter, to not mention any identifiable information about individual staff, members, or students, and not use profanity, insults, or threats. If these guidelines cannot be followed, I will be providing a warning, and then if needed, I will turn off the microphone and end your comment time. Please remember that this is an opportunity for the board to hear from the community so we will not respond in the moment to comments or questions. Staff may follow up to connect with you based on your comment. Finally, before we begin, I want to emphasize that for the protection of everyone's privacy, public comments may not be mentioned by identifiable information about students or staff, regardless if the comment is positive or negative. If you are not able to resolve a situation working with the appropriate staff and need further assistance, every board member is accessible by phone and email, and we can connect with you to the appropriate resources to help process your concerns. We're also always very happy to hear about positive feedback about individual staff members, but again, request that it is done either via email, phone, or to a board member directly in person. We ask for your cooperation on this important part of our process. Thank you. Director Norville, will you please help call through the list of speakers?
Thank you, Chair. Ethan Burrow.
Members of the board, my name is Ethan Burrow. I stand before you today as a resident of your neighborhood, a proud product of public schools, and the son of a dedicated second grade teacher. I've decided to speak today because I believe that it is crucial to shed a light on the consequences of defunding and devaluing public education and prioritizing charter and private schools over public institutions. I'm going to use Arizona, a state that I used to live in, as a stark example. In recent years, Arizona has experienced a deadline in education standards and quality due to their draconian policies towards public education. According to the National Assessment of Educational Progress, Arizona's student proficiency levels have stagnated and in many parts of the state have actually regressed. Arizona ranks dead last in overall public education quality, but they do rank fourth in the total amount of charter schools operating in their state. Furthermore, attacking collective bargaining rights and unions, as seen in Arizona, leads to dismal outcomes for educators. Shockingly, a first-year teacher in Arizona often earns less in a year than I make doing DoorDash part-time. This is not only unjust, but it's detrimental to our nation's future. So I ask, do we want to be like Arizona, a state that doesn't value its students, parents, or educators, or do we want to be somewhere that believes education is a fundamental human right that should not be behind a paywall? Our country bears a profound duty to educate its youth, a responsibility that should never be handed over to profit-driven entities, capitalists, or religious zealots. Instead of closing our schools or defunding them, we should be doing the exact opposite, increasing funding for our public schools and opening more of them to ensure that every single child receives a quality education. It's disheartening to see that we always seem to have the resources for bloated police budgets, an oversized military, and excessive foreign aid. We even have the means to incarcerate 25% of the world's prison population, but we're told that there's simply not enough money to educate our youth or to pay our educators. It's a harsh reminder of just how misplaced our priorities have become. Education is the cornerstone of our entire society's future success, and it's time that we prioritize it accordingly. Let's learn from states like Arizona and chart a different course here in Minneapolis, one that invests in public education and supports our educators and empowers our youth to reach their full potential. Thank you.
Thank you. Katie Campoff.
Good evening, directors. My name is Katie Campoff, and I'm a special education English 9 inclusion teacher at Henry High School, or same team. A Minneapolis resident and proud MFT 59 union steward. I wanted to let the board know how the first 2 weeks at Henry have been going so far. Last Friday, we asked our English 9 classes to describe their first week of high school in one word. We heard overwhelmingly fun, funny, amazing, cool, and some tiring, which is fair. The responses have been a little different from our 10th through 12th graders. Where is Mr. Blank? Where is Miss Blank? When will the Henry News Hour be on? Can I take photography or engineering class? Why do I have to take an online asynchronous CTE elective in the media center with no teacher? Here's some Henry High School data. We have nearly 900 students enrolled. 92% of our population are students of color. 77% receive free and reduced lunch. 20% receive special education services, and our growing newcomer population is at 51 students. When the CDD passed in May 2020, the goals were academics, equity, and sustainability. Equity was the word we kept hearing when we were told we would lose our engineering, robotics, and media arts programs and teachers in the fall of 2023. This year, we have lost 15 sections of electives and our most popular and beloved Henry News Hour to the North CTE Center. None of these 15 in-person electives have been replaced. My colleagues that once taught 100 to 120 Henry students a day in person now have 4 to 8 students in person from across the district and 70 online. So how is this impacting Henry students? There's a lot of confusion. Students do not want to miss 3 Henry classes for 1 elective class at the CTE centers. The busing has been inconsistent and not accessible to many of our students with language and special needs. When already vulnerable and marginalized people, especially children, have to jump through difficult and inaccessible hoops, this further disadvantages them and their community. Our school community, our school community is experiencing all the repercussions that the CDD leaders in charge did not have the foresight to prevent. The Henry community lost 15 electives this year, and we are asking the board to restore many of these beloved electives, like the Henry News Hour and photography, in the name of equity. Thank you.
Thank you. David Logston. Is David Logston here?
Well, hello, and thank you for letting me speak here for you. I'm Dave Logston. I'm the current president of the Twin Cities chapter of Veterans for Peace. I had a son and 2 daughters who went through the entire gamut of schools and middle schools and high school and graduated from the Minneapolis school system. I currently have a grandson who's in transition. Goes to Fair School, is a sophomore at Fair School. My experiences with the Minneapolis school system has been a terrific one for my children and my grandson because it's such a diverse population that they learn as being little white kids born into in a diverse situation and learning about different cultures and understanding. We work in the area of bringing awareness of the cost of war, and our bloated military budget has created shortfalls, and we have a tremendous need in this country, homelessness, poverty, and especially in schools. It's heartbreaking for me to see spending trillions of dollars on weapons systems, while teachers have to have GoFundMes to get books to teach their classes. And the teachers that are real warriors, all the time I get, "Thank you for your service." And I say, I was just trying to get through. I was trying to survive and help the comrades that were in the military beside me to get through and survive. It wasn't about service. Service is school teachers, nurses, social workers, people like that. They're having a lifetime of service, and we need to prioritize our thinking and call our representatives and let them know it's a bloated military budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda Dobbs.
Hi, my name is Amanda Dobbs. I have 3 kids in 3 MPS schools, Loring, Olson, and Henry. I'm also an associate educator at Olson Middle School. I'm here today because the Olson Middle School Community Group demands that the district immediately provide us with ELL services at Olson Middle School. Both state and federal legislation address the needs of English learners. According to the Minnesota Department of Education, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 initially determined that students who do not demonstrate English language proficiency have a right to a language instruction educational program that provides them access to the academic content instruction that all children receive. During Olson Open House, we had no interpreters. Last week, we had a parent wait outside all day with her 4-year-old on a 90-degree day because we could not communicate with them. This is unacceptable. Olson has over 85 students who qualify for ELL services, including many who are new to the country and have very limited English language skills. Unfortunately, Olson does not have any ELL teachers on staff. We are supposed to have a full-time and a part-time teacher, but the positions are unfilled. We have only one staff member who's fluent in Spanish. This staff member has to take on added responsibility of interpreting anytime a Spanish-speaking family needs support. Olson families also speak Hmong, Somali, Amharic, Omoral, Vietnamese, American Sign Language, and more. We believe that all families deserve to be able to communicate with schools and teachers. We need the district to step up, step in, and provide support to Olson Middle School. Thank you.
Thank you. Katina Taylor.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Katina Taylor. I'm a special educational assistant on leave, serving as the president of our MFT 59 ESP chapter. I'm here tonight to recognize the value of our recent partnership and collaboration with our district. Given the nature of our roles, there will be times when our union and our district disagree. But there's also times when we do great work together to benefit our students, our staff, and our school communities. And on these occasions, I think it's important that we all take a moment to celebrate what we accomplished through partnership. Okay. A few weeks ago, we, our union and district, worked together and agreed upon a $5,000 recruitment bonus, a $5,000 retention bonus, a $1,500 referral bonus, and a $40 an hour rate for bus aides. Once all of these positions are filled, the bus aide positions, our district has agreed to meet with our union and have another conversation around extra hours for all ESPs. I want to thank, yes. I would really love to thank our board of directors, our leaders from our district, our Superintendent Cox for partnering on all of these wonderful incentives. It shows that you share our understanding that ESPs make school happen. And by retaining and recruiting ESPs, our students will be safer at school. Parents will worry less about their children riding the bus. Students will receive more individualized academic support. And our most vulnerable students will receive the essential cares they need. So while we may sit on the opposite side of the table, and surely there will be times we don't see eye to eye, I sincerely look forward to those opportunities when we can work together and share a common interest that benefits our student staffs and school communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Kulia Pringle.
Just a brief reminder as we're waiting on the next speaker to please no identifiable names or comments made. Thank you.
Kulia Pringle, National Parents Union, and I'm giving my time to an Anderson parent. And she needs an interpreter. Spanish.
Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es María del Socorro Solano González. Soy recién llegada. Buenas tardes. Mi nombre es María del Socorro Solano González. Soy recién llegada y soy madre de 2 niñas, las cuales estudian en Emerson y Anderson.
Good afternoon. My name is Maria Socorro Solano Gonzalez. I just arrived to this country, and I'm mother of 2 girls, which they studied at Emerson and Anderson.
La falta de control y respeto en la escuela Anderson es preocupante porque se está generando un ambiente inseguro para nuestros hijos y es algo angustiante para nosotros como padres.
The lack of control and respect in the Anderson school is very worrisome. It is generating a hostile environment for our kids, and is very worrisome for us as parents.
La comunicación con el liderazgo de Anderson no existe y es algo muy importante y necesario y se debe de fomentar, ya que hace falta la cercanía de académicos hacia los padres y hacia los alumnos. No es solo comunicar información, es también escuchar para que juntos se encuentren soluciones a los problemas y a las inquietudes.
The communication with the leadership team at Anderson doesn't exist. It's very important. It's really necessary to foment this type of communication. It is needed to have the goals with the academics, with the staff, to the parents and the students. It is not only the information, is not to share the communication, it's also también the importance of the time to listen, so together we can find solutions to the problems and the inequities.
La función de un director de escuela va más allá de sentarse detrás de un escritorio y firmar documentos. Un director debe de tener conocimiento y control de su entorno, que es de mucha importancia para la educación e integridad de los alumnos, así como conocer y apoyar a sus compañeros de trabajo. Mantener comunicación y empatía con todos y cada uno de los padres de familia, todo por un bien común, los niños, que son el motor y la principal razón de la escuela, porque ellos son el futuro de la sociedad.
The function of the principal is not only just sitting behind a desk and sign documents. A principal should have the knowledge and know the environment, which is very important for the education and integrity for the students, as well to know and support the staff and maintain communication and empathy with every single parents. Everything for a welcome for the kids, since they are the ones who inspire us and the main reason for the school, and they are the futures of the society.
Mi pregunta para ustedes es, ¿cuándo van a reconocer la gravedad del problema? ¿Y hasta cuándo van a tomar cartas en el asunto para hacer realidad un verdadero cambio? ¿Hasta cuándo van a cambiar el liderazgo de Anderson?
My question to you is, when are you going to recognize the concern of the gravity of this problem, and when are you going to do something about it? When are you going to do something about it to see a real change? When are we going to see the leadership at Anderson?
Pido que tomen las acciones necesarias para hacer y lograr un cambio verdadero.
I ask them to take the actions needed to see and have a real change.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias. Colectiva bilingüe.
Hello, my name is Molly Dangler, and I'm co-president of Colectiva Bilingüe. Colectiva, or the Bilingual Education Collective, is a nonprofit dedicated to advocating for the equity of experience among Minneapolis dual language programs, building a bilingual community, and raising and distributing funds among the schools in a way that models equitable, community-centric practices. We are here today to ask for your support in ensuring the equity of experience among our programs as you consider school consolidation or transformation. I'd like you to consider our current reality. There's currently a freeze on enrollment at all 5 of our dual language programs. Although there are some classes with openings, I'm guessing that this decision was made based on overall staff to student ratio and the limitations of space that we're facing at Emerson and Green Central. Teacher vacancies is a national crisis that is not unique to the dual language program, in which every position requires bilingualism and is not due to lack of qualified candidates. This year, Colectiva has collected case studies of qualified candidates that we risked losing or could not recruit due to barriers in visa and green card sponsorship. Others whose international teacher preparation programs present barriers in navigating the tiered licensure system, and still others who are just not getting through our own HR department to fill the many open positions we have. We encourage you to strengthen these pathways as well as look at what's working at the dual language programs that are fully staffed to find sustainable solutions to invest in and retain our talented bilingual educators. Staffing issues cannot be conflated with the success and demand for a program. As you'll hear tonight, winning the lottery and getting placed in the program is an integral part of the identity of our students and families, mine included. Over the past year, my awareness of all the barriers to winning this lottery in MPS dual language education has grown through being in a relationship with many families who are new to the U.S. Last winter and spring's numbers were some of the highest that we've seen, and these numbers are not changing. Access to a culturally and linguistically sustaining education in which students can be evaluated in their home language to understand their academic brilliance and not just their reader level, and share that with caregivers directly without the use of an interpreter at best, is a lever that is entirely within our control. Please right-size the dual language program to fit the demands of the community, the stated mission and vision of the district, and welcome back the students who are turning away daily. Create a K-8 school to make the bilingual pathway more explicit. Look where students who are in the program are living and the number of students in bilingual preschools and immigration trends
Please
to make
finish your
sustainable
comment.
choices. Colectiva is excited to partner with you in this conversation.
Thank you. Maria Cisneros.
Again, as we're waiting on our next speaker, if we can remember no identifiable names given to the person who either you are giving positive or negative feedback or referring to a direct principal at the schools.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Mi nombre es María. Buenas tardes, superintendente, miembros de la mesa directiva,
of the board.
asociados y abogado.
The attorneys and associates.
Mi nombre es María
My
Cisneros.
name is Maria Cisneros
Soy parte del Sindicato Nacional de Padres.
of the Parent Advocate Group.
Hoy vengo a apoyar a una mamá de
A
Anderson
mom from Anderson.
por motivo de que ella no sabe leer ni escribir
She's not able to read or write.
y ella quiere presentar su preocupación y su queja.
I bring a concern to you guys.
Buenas tardes con
afternoon.
todo. Yo me llamo María Elena Roldán.
My name is Maria Elena Roldán.
Gracias.
Thank you.
El motivo por el
The reason
que estoy aquí
that I'm here
es porque yo soy
is
una
because
nueva en
I
este
am
país,
new in this country,
en esta escuela de Anderson,
at Anderson School,
donde me mandaron a poner a mi
where
hija.
I was sent to bring my daughter.
Desafortunadamente,
Unfortunately,
yo tengo poco de haber llegado aquí a
I
Minneapolis.
have very little to come here to Minneapolis.
Mi desilusión,
My disappointment,
mi frustración,
my frustration,
mi descontento
my unhappiness
es que cuando llego el primer
is
día a
when
la
I
casa abierta
got there to the open house the first day
de la escuela de Anderson,
at Anderson School.
había muchas familias,
There were so many families,
incluyéndome a mí,
including my family,
que ni siquiera nos dieron
which were not even able or given
la bienvenida
a welcome,
ni un saludo,
not even a hello.
mucho menos
And nevertheless,
nos informaron.
we weren't informed of anything.
Yo me sentí muy mal
I felt horrible
porque no había
because
intérpretes.
there was no interpreters.
Yo corría de un lado para el
I
otro.
was running back and forth
Hasta ahora
until now.
no sé ni quién es la
I
principal
don't even know who the principal is.
ni la subprincipal.
I don't even know who the vice principal is.
Qué falta de liderazgo
What a lack of leadership
en la escuela de Anderson.
at Anderson School.
Me preocupa mucho
I'm very concerned
porque mi hija
because my daughter,
viene con raíces,
it's coming from
valores,
roots, values,
respeto,
respect,
y también me preocupa su
and
seguridad
also I am concerned about her
y
safety
el bienestar de sus
and the
compañeros.
well-being of her peers.
¿Qué pasa con el
What's
liderazgo
going to
de
happen?
la
What happens
escuela de
with
Anderson?
the leadership in Anderson?
Si a mí como madre de
If
familia
myself as a parent
me hicieron sentir mal
make me feel horrible,
al no ponerme atención,
being ignored,
a mí y a otras familias.
and not only me, but other families as well.
Qué decepción.
What a disappointment.
¿Cómo harán sentir a nuestros niños?
How would you make our children feel?
Gracias al liderazgo
And thanks to the leadership,
de los padres del Sindicato Nacional
parents from the syndicate group
y a la directora Cerrillo,
and the director Cerrillo,
que aunque no sea del distrito,
that even though she's not from the district,
está siempre al pendiente
she
de
was
las
always
familias
on top of families
y nuestros hijos.
and our children.
Porque si no,
Because if it wasn't from that,
estuviera más perdida.
I would have been even more lost.
Por favor,
So please,
pongan cartas sobre las
Just
mesas.
pay attention to what you're doing.
Si hay algo que
If
llega a
there is
pasar a mi
something,
hija,
then it could happen to my daughter
a alguno de sus compañeros,
or her peers.
los hago responsables
I will make you all
al
responsible
liderazgo de la mesa
to
directiva,
the leadership of the
al
board,
asociado de la escuela
to the
Anderson
members of Anderson,
y a usted, abogado,
and to you, the attorney,
porque ya pasó más de un año
because it's been over a year
y no han tomado acción
and you have
ni han
not
hecho cambios.
done anything, actions or changes.
Quiero agradecer
I want to
otra
thank
vez
again
a la directora Cerrillo,
the director Cerrillo
a la directora
Please, no
Katia,
identifiable
por
names.
su liderazgo
for
con
leadership,
las familias
no
y la
mencionen
comunidad
nombres.
latina.
for her leadership,
Y la comunidad.
and the Latin community. Thank you.
Se tienen que nombrar nombres porque son las
We
personas
have to
que han estado
mention
con la
names
comunidad. Los
because it's
demás
the
no están
people
haciendo
who
nada, lo
have
siento.
been with the
Gracias.
community, and the rest have not done anything. Thank you.
Gracias por tu comentario. Joanne Goddard. Joanne Goddard. Jane Rolfing.
Hi, my name is Jane Rolfing and I'm a senior at South High School. I was one of the student leaders during the teacher strike and an occupant of this building. And now I'm the creator of the first ever Minneapolis Public Schools Student Union. And first and foremost, I'm a student who's been in the Minneapolis Public School District my whole life from kindergarten to 12th grade. I've been showing up to school every day for 6 hours a day for almost 13 years. And we're all here because we want safe schools, right? In my 13 years as a student, I've never truly felt safe. I remember my very first real code red lockdown in school. I was 9 years old. I hid in the library for nearly an hour. Our library and media center teacher tried to keep us calm and distracted us by passing out I Spy books to us. I remember pointing to the dominoes, action figures, and drawing as I saw them on the page, showing to them my teacher and hearing her whispered, shaken voice say, "Good job." I wish I could say this was my first and only lockdown, but sadly that is far from the case. Why do I not feel safe in school? We haven't been able to combat safety in school all these years. Well, I'll tell you what, redistricting and segregating students isn't helping. Cutting our arts and STEM programs isn't helping. Cutting the things that make school fun, like dances, pep assemblies, and field trips, are not helping. These kids are bored. We are depressed. We are scared. Students do drugs in bathrooms and fight each other just to feel something because they're so sad all the time. There is a mental health crisis. Kids have nothing to look forward to in school anymore. Shouldn't this be a place of joy and learning and not fear and boredom? The last few years have been hard for all of us, I know, but please, these kids are struggling. We are struggling. Do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Familias de Emerson.
Again, brief reminder as we come up to the podium, no identifiable names of directors or principals in leadership.
All right, got my whole team up here with me. My name is Rochelle Janino. When my twins were born, Rochelle Janino, parent at Emerson. When my twins were born, I wanted them to learn a new language. I live in North Minneapolis. I'm a proud homeowner, the first in my family to purchase a home and travel internationally. I have traveled all around the world from Africa, Cuba, and Dominican Republic. The first time I left the country, I went to the Dominican Republic, and I couldn't believe there were so many people that looked like me that spoke other languages besides English. Such an eye-opener. Then I went to Cuba and found the same thing. And of course, when I went to Africa, they spoke a minimum of 4 languages. I never felt so uneducated in my life. My twins were born 6 years ago, and I immediately put them in a Spanish immersion daycare. I went broke paying for daycare. I had no extra money to do anything. When I enrolled them into daycare, I asked what were the options to continue the bilingual education. They recommended Emerson, and I knew The openings were scarce. I wanted them to have a fair shot at getting into the school, so I wrote on the application that my children's primary language was Spanish. Even though I don't know Spanish, my children's first language ever spoken was Spanish. When my kids came home from daycare saying, "La leche, mommy, la leche," or agua, mommy, I had to Google it to see what it meant. They recommended Emerson, and I knew that that was where they needed to be. My kids, I had to use my translator on my phone to understand what La Leche meant. Recently heard that there was a freeze on placing students across all 5 duolingual languages schools because they're all full. There are actually open spots in some grades at Emerson, but amazing advocates and allies like our principal can't pull students from our waiting list because I imagine we are breaking some kind of code, and students in the building are 500 designated for 363. Our district motto is Urban Education, Global Citizens, and we definitely aren't upholding that claim if we are denying students across to maintain and grow and their global home languages or to learn another language at an early age. Did you want to say?
I see
Thank
our time
you.
is up. I just say I'm a new parent to Emerson. Urban education definitely speaks more than one language, and every global citizen needs to speak more than one language. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry about going over, guys. Thank you.
Gary Marvin Davison.
Rest in well-deserved peace, Ms. Zulu. Gary Marvin Davison, New Salem Educational Initiative, just a 12-minute walk from the Davis Center, teaching students from a demographic academically abused by the Minneapolis Public Schools for 4 decades. Extended comments at newsalemeducation.blogspot.com, where 55,000 people are now viewing. The blog is the best source of information, not only in Minnesota and the United States, but in the People's Republic of China, my beloved Taiwan, Algeria, longtime viewership in Germany. I have 3 things to emphasize to you tonight. Remember the evening that I gave you the litany of superintendents from Richard Green to Ed Graff and told you, as you surely should know, they were all failures. If by that we mean the dispensation of a knowledge-intensive education in addressing the problems of children who have languished in their academic performance for decades. The second thing I would tell you is that you have no good options when you go on a search. Take that seriously. I've done the research. You wouldn't want the outcomes of the BWP's latest searches in Savannah, Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and Savannah. You have a chance, as A.G. Crable told you from the Council of Great City Schools, to make a selection that is revolutionary. I don't say that lightly. You'll never get policy from the national level or the state level that means anything. But you will have an opportunity to make history, and I think this board has the ability to go internally and do just that.
Thank you. Elena Sosa.
Buenas tardes a todos, a mesa directiva y al abogado. Ya creo que saben que he estado aquí algún par de veces, entonces no puede ser, como que no puedo pasar como desapercibida. Ok, mi nombre es Elena, mi estudiante está en Anderson. Llevo 1 año pidiendo cambios y sigue la misma situación. Esto no va a cambiar si no hay un cambio de liderazgo y administración. Nuestros estudiantes y maestros necesitan estos cambios. Señor abogado, si pasa algo muy grave en esta escuela, yo lo hago responsable. Llevamos 6 días de escuela y pregunten cuántas peleas han habido hasta ahora. Superintendente, nosotros tuvimos fe en usted, pero ahora cuestionamos su falta de liderazgo y también a esta mesa directiva, excepto la señora Cerrillo y la señora Fania. A los medios, espero que estén escuchando esto. Ustedes, los medios que están aquí presentes, esto es real. Debemos de tomar una acción. Gracias. Y por último, no solo quiero que una escuela Emerson funcione como ahora, sino quiero que todas las escuelas funcionen con el buen liderazgo de Emerson. Gracias.
You have seen my face many times in here. Good afternoon to all of you, to the board, superintendent, associates, and attorneys. My name is Elena, and my student is from Anderson. It's been a year that I've been asking you for changes, and we are still in the same situation, and seems like this is not going to change. If I don't see any change in the leadership or administration, our students, our teachers need that change on leadership. Mr. Attorney, if something ever happened to us or to my student, you would be the person responsible. It's only been 6 days of school, and do you know how many fights have we had so far in these 6 days in Anderson? Superintendent, we did have faith in you and in your leadership. Now we're questioning your leadership. Also goes for the board of directors, except Mr. Cerrillo and...
No identifiable names, please.
Sorry, pero eso es.
Thank you.
Sorry, but I have to say it.
No identifiable names, or we'll have to mute the mic.
That'll work. I hope that we're listening to us, social media and everywhere else, and to everybody here present that is listening to us, because it's a real issue. Thank you very much. So the good leadership
El buen liderazgo de Anderson,
of Anderson
de
School, Emerson,
debe funcionar para todas
should work for all schools across the district. Thank you.
Gracias. Jeff Schmidt.
Good evening. Thanks for taking the time to hear me out. My name is Jeff Schmidt. I am the parent of 3 students that are currently in Minneapolis Public Schools, one at Henry, one at Olson, one at Loring. I'm a proud Northsider. I'm a former graduate of Minneapolis Public Schools myself, and I'm here tonight to talk to you all about the food that's being served at Olson Middle School right now. I'm here to please beg for Minneapolis Public Schools to fast track actual kitchen at Olson Middle School so we can have our students properly fed there instead of the basic convenience store style food that they have available to them at the hot lunch program right now. It's pretty well known that students can't learn on janky fuel, as we like to say around that I've heard sometimes. And you know, the things that I've seen both from my student that's at Henry that was at Olson previously and my student that's at Olson right now, I wouldn't personally eat it myself. So, you know, I'm really asking you guys to fast track this kitchen that needs to be at Olson right now, as opposed to putting in a kitchen at other schools that maybe have more funding and things like that. We really need to get this taken care of for our students so our students can learn Our students can have really good food to eat. A lot of these kids on the north side, this might be the only meal that they're getting during the day, and it's really important for them to have healthy food in their diet. So that's why I'm here, and I really hope that y'all hear me out and we can get some good food over at Olson right now. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Roberto Eisfalm.
Good afternoon. My name is Rob Aspome. I live in the Bryant neighborhood in South Minneapolis, and my daughters are in 2nd and 3rd grade at Clara Barton Community School. I'm also a member of Minneapolis Families for Public Schools, or MFPS, the organization that just hosted the rally before today's meeting. One of the things that my fellow MFPS comrades and I are concerned about right now is the upcoming search for a new district superintendent. We understand that the district's plan is to complete the search this fall. This raises the question, what kinds of opportunities has the district planned for engaging families about our vision for MPS and what we would like to see in our future superintendent? Many of us have been concerned and disappointed with the actions and rhetoric from the district in recent years, including the ham-fisted imposition of the CDD during the COVID-19 pandemic, the antagonistic stance taken toward our educators leading up to and during the strike in spring 2022, and recent talk about laying off educators and closing schools. We need a superintendent that is committed to investing in and fighting for public education, not one who wants to close our schools. We need a superintendent who values our educators and the essential work they do with our children in the city, not one that wants to lay off our most vital public workers. We need a superintendent who values families and children and is committed to creating a public school system that meets the needs of all students, not one that pits the needs of students and families against one another in a zero-sum game. And finally, we need a superintendent that understands that choice is just a code word for a district that doesn't meet the needs of all students, which is exactly the thing that we need to build. Because of our concerns and our stake in MPS, the families with Minneapolis Families for Public Schools are demanding that the district hold public listening sessions with families across the city to help shape the priorities of the upcoming superintendent search. Our families deserve a strong voice in this process. The future of our students, educators, and schools are at stake. Thank you.
Thank you. Terrence Freelix L.
Again, just a reminder as we're coming up, no identifiable names are mentioned, or we'll have to mute the mic.
Good evening. My name is Terrence Freelix L. I had a lot to say, but I'm not gonna. You guys heard enough, and I'm pretty sure that everybody hit. One thing I want to say is accountability. It's something that's needed in our community. These little ones here need it, not only from us, they get it from the teachers in the community, but they need it from you guys from the board. There's a lot of disparities, there's a lot of things going on. I know you guys are plates are full. Transportation is big. My kids just the other year, just last year, was when they go to Bethune, one of the schools that had a few structural rebuilds that was well needed. But one of the things I want to touch on is transportation. They need a lot. I try every day to get my kids to school, and there's other parents that don't even have the luxury of having a vehicle, let alone someone to help get their kids to school. Those drivers, they're very stressed out. I don't know what the stability of you guys able to bring to the table as far as the other transportations. I'm kind of new in this area. So one of my biggest things is bringing back to the community I grew up in areas that we felt like we was misused. Transportation is a big thing because a lot of these kids didn't get to do a lot of trips last year to take to fund different educational things that can brighten their futures, to help be like you guys on one of the boards. I'm not gonna be real big with it. I just wanna say accountability. I'm not here to point a finger because it all starts with all of us. Only thing I'm asking is, you guys are sitting in very powerful seats. Be accountable for your spot in them seats and not just on the page you get behind. And that's all I'm gonna say.
Thank you. Rebecca Para.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Para. I'm a Minneapolis public school parent. My child currently attends Henry High School and was a former student at Olson Middle School and Lucy Laney Elementary School. After transitioning back to the United States, after living abroad for a period of time, our family found a community and the support we needed through our educators, other families, and students in Minneapolis Public Schools. I'm also a member of MPS, Minneapolis Families for Public Schools, as well as some of the previous speakers that we heard tonight. Our organization acknowledges that universal publicly funded education is a cornerstone of our democracy. Our Minneapolis Public Schools and are vital community organizations and ones where teachers and parents and their unions have fought to meet the real educational and human needs of our children. I know this from my own experience as a parent in Minneapolis Public Schools. Whether it was the 5th grade teachers at Lucy Laney who helped my child seamlessly integrate into a new school, neighborhood, and city, or whether it was the Olson Middle School ESPs and social workers who helped safety plan and accompany my child to the bus during threats of family violence, or whether it was the school nurse from Henry High calling to check in today about my kiddo being sick, it is always, always our frontline education workers who are lovingly and consistently responding to our children's social, emotional, and academic needs. Recently, we have seen our Minneapolis public schools and educators come under attack from false narratives of unprecedented fiscal crises to vilification of our Minneapolis public school educators and unions, to cuts in programming in music, band, and engineering and robotics and North Side schools, such as Olson Middle School and Henry High. These attacks are often disguised with progressive-sounding phrases such as improving failing schools and overcoming the achievement gap. But this current wave of reform threatens to dismantle our Minneapolis public schools to the detriment of our children and our families. As MFPS members, we reject the false rhetoric of free market choice, competition, and privatization.
Please finish your comment.
Sure, thank you. So that's why we're asking, as Minneapolis Families of Public School members, we're asking that the Minneapolis School Board and administrators host public listening sessions with families and students across the city in order for our voices to be heard in the upcoming superintendent search.
Thank you. Eric Angel.
Bonjour, buenas tardes, Habarizeño. Greetings to all of you directors, superintendent. My name is Eric Angel. I'm a parent of a public school student at Green Central Elementary, Green Central Escuela Bilingüe. I come here tonight in support of public schools, and pretty much every comment that I heard tonight from the people that participated in the comments. I also come tonight as a concerned parent who's interested in supporting teachers. I come from a family of teachers, and I want to support their authority in the classroom to limit students' abilities to distract themselves on cell phones and personal electronic devices. I think that schools need to be empowered to control the electronics. I happened to read the New York Times today, and there's an article on the front page about false information that's getting out in the public from other countries. Electronic devices are incredibly difficult to control. We don't have control over them. If there was a CEO in the audience of one of the large tech companies, they would admit that things are starting to get out of control. So we have to be honest with ourselves about the technology in our environments, and this includes at home as well. And we have to consider restricting the technology that's available to our children, especially the young children. so that they can get the nourishing teaching that's required for them to become good citizens for our society and respectful people. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No, Joanne, you want to go back?
We could go back to Joanne Goddard if she's here. Is Joanne here? All right, that ends our public comment time.
Thank you. Thank you again, everyone who took the time to share feedback and perspective with us. We will now, directors, we will now take a 10-minute recess, and we will reconvene at 6:37. Okay, I can go. I will now call this meeting back to order. I will now call this meeting back to order. I will now call this meeting back to order and turn it over to Interim Superintendent Cox for an opening remarks and right into the presentation item, an overview of our Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment. Thank you, Interim Superintendent Cox. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, student representatives, board members, colleagues, and those joining us here and online. I will tell you, there is nothing like the first day of school. Whether you're a teacher, a principal, a student, you hear and feel the buzzing energy of a new school year and what that brings. I spent most of my time last week in schools, starting my day, for example, at Bethune, where I did breakfast and maybe helped a first grader get to class, and it was hard to leave. We had a hard time parting ways ourselves that first day, that morning at breakfast. I was at Olson checking in on our new principal, Dr. Campbell, and we went around and looked at classrooms. It was just great to see the energy of our middle schools. And then at Anthony, I helped at dismissal and listened in on all the middle school talk about how the first day went, which was very interesting. It was truly a privilege to witness the magic that was happening in our classrooms and in our schools every day. There's so many who worked to ensure our schools were ready to receive students last week, but I want to specifically shout out a few groups. Thank you to our operations staff, our engineers, our custodians who worked so hard to make sure our buildings were ready to receive our students. Thank you to those who provided coordinated training sessions for staff in the weeks before school started on topics ranging from new laws and policies to making our strategic plan and climate framework come to life in our schools. And thank you. Thank you to all the teachers, related service professionals, ESPs, and other school support staff, and central office employees who welcomed new and returning students, and in some cases, helped step into temporary roles to cover for a vacant position. As we are all aware, it's a very competitive market out there for employees, and our HR team and hiring managers are working as quickly as they can to fill the remaining positions. We recently announced, which President Katina Taylor told you about today in public comments, an agreement with the ESP chapter of MFT to provide signing bonuses to new ESPs, retention bonuses for our current ESPs, and a referral bonus for recruiting an ESP who comes to MPS and remains in their position. Please, please help us get the word out about these amazing opportunities in MPS and about this exciting new ESP incentive package. I know the weather has been pretty amazing these past few days, but I do want to acknowledge that the extreme heat of the first day of school this year was a reminder of the work we need to do in response to a changing climate. We've made progress with capital projects related to cooling and now have 10 schools that are without sufficient cooling, but it will take several years in order to finish them all, especially with some of the most complicated and expensive projects that are remaining. I wasn't able to make it to all 10 schools that first day, but I did spend time in several of them. It was very hot, and it was actually hard to function in uncool spaces. Remember, Anthony Middle School was the last school I went to at the end of the day? Yeah, it was hot. We continue to support and prepare these remaining schools by adding supplements like fans, portable cooling units, by providing additional water, and through helping school leaders modify their days to rotate into cool spaces. We'll also continue to review our inclement weather protocols and make changes as needed, just as we have done with our e-learning day plan this year. I'd also like to partner with the board, our employee groups, and with our students and caregivers to examine whether our school calendar might need to be revised in the future to limit the time that we're in school during June when it's most likely to be the hottest. I know it can be easy to put heat out of our minds as we approach fall and winter, but I commit to keep preparing so we're as ready as possible for its return. Overall, I can say it's been a great first week, and we really do have the most amazing students, families, and staff. I also want to share a few of the wonderful recognitions and events that we have coming up over the next few weeks. We are excited to honor Latin Heritage Month beginning Friday, September 15th through October 15th. There will be many celebrations honoring the generations of Latin Americans who have made positive contributions to our society and culture, and I want to highlight just a couple. We have an exhibit called Pontom for the Golden Cage featuring artists Hedgeki from Mexico and Constanza Carballo from Argentina. Join us for opening night in the Davis Center Art Gallery on September 14th from 6 to 7:30 p.m. There'll be refreshments and conversation and an opportunity to meet the artist. Come out to the Latin Heritage Month Fiesta on Saturday, October 7th from 11 to 2 at Green Central Elementary. There will be food, music, a literacy event, games, and more. And then on September 30th, we'll host the annual Back to School Honoring Our Youth powwow, which will take place from 1 to 6 p.m. at North High School's Hobbs Field. And don't forget, the annual Farm to School Community Barbecue will take place on Wednesday, September 27th from 4 to 6:30 outdoors at the MPS Culinary and Wellness Services. I hear there may be a few of directors and myself that might be in the corn shucking contest, so you might want to come by and see that. If you're looking to get involved in our schools, I encourage you to visit the district calendar, which includes information about our parent advisory councils, or PACs as they're known, as well as observances and celebration calendars, which highlight the observances that are important to our MPS community. And finally, I want to ask for everyone's help in spreading the word about Citywide Student Leadership Board, as applications for this school year are now open through September 20th. Citywide seeks to move students closer to systems of power and adult decision makers within MPS. Members will help shape meetings and identify topics that will create positive change for all MPS student experiences. We are looking for 2 to 4 students from each high school to act as representatives for their school community. Any 9th through 12th grade students interested in sharing their voice should apply. All they need to do is go to MPS homepage and enter Citywide into the search to find more information and the application. As I personally meet on a regular basis with Citywide, I can say it's an amazing experience, and I really ask and encourage all of our students to apply. With the chair's permission, I will now ask Executive Director of Strategic Initiatives, Sarah Hunter, to provide an overview of our Minnesota Comprehensive Assessments, or MCAs. Following the data, we will look forward to discussing the strategies we're taking to continue and accelerate the progress we've made on academic outcomes. Executive Director Hunter.
Good evening. Good evening, Board Chair Elamine, other members of the board, Interim Superintendent Cox, and members of the community. I would not say that it is a privilege to share this data. It is a part of my role, and there are positive things to share, but I want to just be really clear that as I begin, it feels like this is in opposite order. So I want to just share that a month ago in our Committee of the Whole, we shared some really tangible steps we're taking as a district to improve outcomes for students, and this data follows that. So I'm going to sort of circle back to some of those key highlights as I close out the data conversation, because we knew when we looked at our mid-year and then end-of-year FAST data last year that we needed to do something different as it relates to this data as well. So I'll start with reading MCA data. So our students take the MCA in reading and math, and then in science in just a couple grades. In reading last spring, we moved from 42% down 1% to 41% of students proficient. That is similar to the state, but again, not the trend that we want to see. The majority of grade levels are also down very slightly, with the exception of grade 3 and 4. And then as we look at different student groups, so students receiving special education services actually increased from 16 to 19% in terms of reading proficiency. And then students who are not eligible for educational benefits went up. I want to acknowledge and pause here for a moment. That is not the portion of our students that we would want to increase without their peers who qualify. So I just want to highlight that here. Our English learners went from 4 to 5% proficient, but we don't want to be at 5. Within MPS, our proficiency rates of most home language student populations held pretty steady, with the exception of our students whose home language is Spanish, who moved from 14 to 11. I'm going to transition to math, and then again, I'll share some of the strategies we're using for these at the close. So our math proficiency rate is telling sort of the opposite story of some of what I just shared for literacy. We're on an increase, moved from 33 to 35%. The state is also up, but we are up slightly more than when we're, sort of looking at the state, but we're not at pre-pandemic levels yet. So seeing a positive increase. Nearly every grade level also increased. And then, again, we're on a similar trajectory with the state in mathematics. Most of our demographic subgroups did increase from year over year, so from 22 to 23. And then I wanted to call out a few spaces specifically. So you'll see in both reading and in math, our students receiving special education services had an increase last year. And then in math, what I had highlighted in reading is that only our students who don't qualify for educational benefits increased. In math, it's both. So, but by more for our students who don't qualify for educational benefits. So something for us to reflect on as we look at our data from last year is, in some cases, we are continuing to do better by students who we were already serving well pre-pandemic. So I think looking really critically at the spaces where we're improving will be important this year. Most of our ethnic groups did show small increases. I will apologize to those that looked at this ahead of time. There was a mistake on this slide. It said decrease. That is my mistake. I will own that. So it was an increase. We do, though, I wanted to highlight, we have a trend now where we're seeing ongoing struggles to meet students who identify as Asian students' needs. So that's something that we have a third year of declining proficiency in that area. All of our other state ethnic groupings did hold steady or improved. And then I wanted to speak specifically about home language here as well. So pretty steady within 1 to 2 percentage points. But then students who speak Hmong, Somali, or English were the 3 home language groups that had significant increases, so 3 to 5% increases. But again, all groups still below pandemic levels. So one of the things I wanted to circle back to, and I think Dr. Fearing would be open to questions as well as board members have them, is related to what are we doing to invest. So I think one of the things that I was thinking about as I was looking at this data is the intentionality behind making sure that students have both high quality core instruction. So last year you're seeing increases in mathematics. This past year it was the first year of a math adoption in elementary, and there was a lot of professional development for teachers and new materials. So that's a positive first look at our math achievement following the new curriculum. And then I know that many of you have already heard we're looking to determine what we need in terms of materials for literacy, which, given that we're not seeing that same increase in literacy, feels like a positive, productive next step for academics. And then in addition to core, of course, we've talked a lot about ensuring that students also have access to Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions this year through the intervention triad. So feels productive that we have those two things paired given the data that I just shared. We'll hand it back to you, Chair Elamine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Interim Superintendent Cock and Executive Director Hunter. Directors, are there any questions on the MCA information that was just shared with us? If so, please hit your request to speak button, and we'll try to go in order here. Director Beachy.
One place I'd like to start and kind of ask about is the students who are opting out of the test. I don't know if that's something we could talk about or mention. My understanding, so please correct me if I'm wrong, that you are opt out, you're counted non-proficient. And I don't know if that's something, that's not a district thing, that's a state thing. And so I guess with these numbers that we have, is this including the people who have opted out? Is this, what are the numbers of people who have opted out? What do the numbers look like without those opting out there? And I just am going to make a little speech here if I can, but we heard from people from Henry High School. And so if we have a lot of these students who are opting out of these tests at Henry High School, you got to go over there and watch a one-act play. So you can't tell me that the kid isn't non-proficient if they just memorized the script for Clue, for Pete's sake, So I think that that's something that I'd like to hear more about and see what we can do about that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that even later on.
Thank you for that question, Director Beachy. So one thing I will share about completion rates at the elementary level, the vast majority of our students do take the test. There are a small minority of students who opt out at the elementary level. So those scores are very representative of our student population. That trend starts up as we get closer to high school, not even necessarily in middle schools. We still have, again, the majority of our students taking the test, especially in math, reading, in middle. At the high school, it sort of depends on the high school, but you're right, there are higher opt-out rates at the high school level. What you can see in the appendix is grade by grade. So just to sort of see whether the high school numbers affect what we're looking at elementary. I'll also offer part of why I appreciate the question is that's why it's so important to us that we use our fast bridge assessments in addition or even sometimes instead of MCA, because that is a more formative tool that we can use multiple times a year that isn't impacted by opting out, so that we have a better sense of what our students know and what they need to know. I would be happy to follow up with the exact numbers around completion rates with the board later on this week if you'd like it.
Yeah, actually, I would. If you could get that information, at least to me, that'd be something that'd be real helpful. Just the last thing, and this is kind of maybe a general thing, and I don't know if you can give me anything specific or not, but when we're looking through the appendix, as you mentioned, I looked at grade 10 and in the reading part, and we went from 2018 to 2021, we saw a 24% increase. And so what was going on there, and why is that not happening now if
Really great question. So for those that are looking online, I'm going to go to that slide. So grade 10, you see the increase here in the blue. That year, very few of our students took the MCA. So that you are correct with your sort of hunch around participation rate there. So I would say I will follow up with the numbers so we can add an N for each of these for the board. But that was a year that we saw very few of our high schoolers taking the test.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Director Emmerich?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So my second grader is too young to take the MCAs, right? But I know that he's never taken the Fast Bridge. He's a special education student in Minneapolis Public Schools, and the opportunity's never been offered to him because of the complexity of his disabilities. It's never even actually been a conversation as a parent that anyone has had with me about if we would want to test him. So when we're looking at our gains in special education, which of course I'm happy to see, my question is, are there students who, I mean, of course there are some because mine is one of them, but kind of what, we know that our students who receive special education services are a very broad spectrum of educational needs. And for our students who have more complex needs, what's the testing reality for them, including MCAs? I don't necessarily need hard and fast numbers. I'm looking more for sort of a narrative of how we actually see that play out. And do we feel like what we have in terms of data is representative across all disability labels and needs and placements?
Thank you for the question. I can probably start and then might need to hand it to one of our SPED folks or to Interim Superintendent Cox. But so I will say, from a special education perspective, there is an alternate assessment that students can take in addition to the MCA 3s, and that decision is made by case managers, right, and is a part of the decision that's made in combination with families. So I think as you move towards third grade, that would be a decision that would need to be made for your child. It's also really important that all students have access to our universal screeners. So I think when we're talking about MCA and the option of taking the test or not, part of the reason I had mentioned before is that our fast screener in the fall, part of the reason it's really important that everybody does have access is that we ensure that you, one, have a space that is appropriate for a student to be taking the test with any accommodations they need, but also in order to make sure that we're layering support in. And then in terms of like number of students, one, I can make sure that I disaggregate this by the different assessments that are taken, and I can send that to the board. And then I might hand it to Interim Superintendent Cox as well.
And I think the other piece of information that we could share with the board is about those that are taking the MTAS. And that should be 1% of our population here, so it is not a widely used. I would say students with developmental cognitive disabilities would be the largest group that would be in that group. Otherwise, everyone should be taking the MCAs, doing the FAST as it is, not to make it a frustrating situation, but certainly making sure there's access and opportunity.
So just to clarify, we would expect that 99% of our students receiving special education services would be represented in this data?
Between 97 and 99.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Director Abdi.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Hunter, for sharing this data with us. The question I have is what Director PG included is, I like to see the total number of students participated and percentage, even if because we are given like a special English, non-English, and all those things, and see what, I know the MCA is optional, and we might not have all students to take it, but at least the data would make sense if it's optional. And we have this trending, like math went up 2%, but reading and science both went down for 1%. And that was a full year after the recovery, after the COVID. So everybody was expecting the other. And I'd like to see those data in the future to see. One other thing, the graduation data is not available yet, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Director Jordan.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So thanks for the presentation. I just wanted to speak on a couple of things really quickly. One, about our scores, and I think when people look at our scores and they say they're declining, it's also pre-pandemic scores and compared to what we have now. And the reason I say that, and I think people need to recognize that, is that one of the things that I did last spring going out to all the schools in District 6 and some other sites is that people in the schools, our principals, our staff, have seen this firsthand. Because of the pandemic, a lot of children didn't have access to books. They didn't have access to the library. They didn't have, so they've seen firsthand in the classrooms a decline in our students' literacy. And that is directly due to the pandemic. And what we're seeing, and the scores are going to reflect that for quite some time, is a dip in certain grades. And we're also seeing that with social emotional development as well across the board. And that was very interesting conversations I had last spring with Associate Superintendent Cavender. I don't believe she's here, but on some of the site visits I was with her and the principals. So I think, having you describe that, I think clarifies that for a lot of people who may not understand that and may recognize that. So please, so thank you for incorporating that type of speech into that, so people just don't look at it and assume that, whatever, think the worst, but have to recognize the fact that that's something that actually has happened, and it is continually going to happen. And also the investment of librarians across our district, media center specialists. Like I've said before, I've advocated for that for years, and that also too will take some time to see a benefit payoff for that. I know we have a lot of sites that have an investment in brand new books, Lindale Library for one, Justice Page, et cetera, et cetera. And again, we're retooling it, so thank you for doing that again, Superintendent and your staff. I think you guys have just been lights out since you've been having this position, and I'm thankful for that. And also, just want to draw attention to the things that we have that are working. I've seen firsthand our Groves, our Press, and Benchmark. I've seen them all three firsthand working, and they are nothing short of phenomenal. And again, we are just starting out here. And again, thank you for your leadership on this, as well as with your staff, Dr. Fearing and others. So I know our scores. So I know our scores are still low, and I just want to say, let's give this some time for moving forward with our curriculum, with our media center specialists, and engaging our students in reading. Our math curriculum, again, is something I've been harping about for quite a while, and then we have a brand new math curriculum as well. And investments. But one thing that really stands out, Dan, and I'm glad you're very supportive of this, and I think people need to also remember, is that we have the MPS Read Well by Third Grade plan. And that is something that I don't think really gets a lot of coverage, or a lot of the bells and whistles that we do really well in this district, and that we are incorporating really well in our schools. And again, I've seen that in the schools in Southwest and in the part of town where I live in, those schools I represent, and our Read Well plan that you have been supportive of well. So we have a lot of good things. And yes, our test scores, that's great, cool, fine, I get it. But we have turned the corner immensely in the last year and a half since you have been our interim superintendent. And I've seen that firsthand as a parent, as a neighbor to other people who have K-5 kids. So I think the investment that we are making right now will take a few years to show in those scores, is what I'm trying to say. So thank you.
Director Norvell.
Thank you. Thank you for the report and for all of the information. And I have to just kind of echo one point that Director Jourdain made about this taking time, because I think a lot of times when things look like they're not working, we want to jump and fix it, myself included. And let's be patient. But I do have a few questions about just things that I'm wondering about. One thing is, I guess I would like to know, because the percentages are so small, right? And it's a very strange time coming off. We're still in the pandemic. We act like we're not, but we are, right? And our kids are still struggling with things. And so I'm just curious, if we have an idea, or if you as experts, would you have an idea of like what would be a good percentage of growth from year to year? What would you like to see? I mean, obviously we want to see it much higher, right? But what does that look like for a percentage of growth that we should be looking for from year to year?
So, Executive Hunter, this is definitely your area of expertise, and I think, as you said, whenever we see a gain over 2%, that is significantly an increase. So when we look at that 3 to 5%, that's really kind of the sweet spot as we look at things. Do you have anything to add about that?
I think the other thing that I would add too is the changes here are changes in percent proficiency, and they aren't, so we are growing as a district in terms of the number and the percent of students proficient, but that isn't the same as a student showing growth as for themselves as an individual. So I think the other piece that I would offer is, I would agree, yes, like anything 2% or more is a significant, a statistically significant increase. And what I would want to be sharing with you all when we share our mid-year growth data is that the majority of our students should be meeting and exceeding their growth targets, right? Because if they're not, we're not making progress in the direction that we need to be in. So I think when we share MCA data and we're sharing changes in proficiency, that metric is slower to change than growth should be, right? So I would want you to hold me accountable for what I just said when we share then mid-year, that what we want to be able to share is that growth is off the charts. Our students are making growth, meeting or exceeding their growth targets. And that takes the smaller changes to instruction each day that the MCA isn't going to see right away. But thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for that reminder and clarification about the difference in student growth and student proficiency, because that is a very big difference, especially when you're looking at what students are learning. I had one other question, and I was just thinking about our English language learner students and our multilingual students and with their low scores. And specifically, I know in past math curriculum, we had resources in Spanish. I know we had those in Spanish. They were not used. Maybe some schools did, but I would say the majority of schools did not use them. But for these students who can use that type of support, do we have those available in our math curriculum and then also in our literacy curriculum to give them that support? Because we do want to make sure that we're seeing their growth and their proficiency, even if it's in their native language. That's still showing what they know.
Appreciate the question, Dr. Norvell. It looks like we have our multilingual expert, Executive Director Warfa here. So if you don't mind jumping in and kind of giving us an overview of that, that would be great.
Good evening. Thank you for the question, Director Norvell, Superintendent Cox, board members. Assalamu alaikum. Buenas noches. Nyojong. I always make a habit of greeting all of you in the languages of our students, EL students in Minneapolis Public Schools. So with the MCAs, first of all, I would like to reference that English learners, those are students who are learning the English language, some of them for the first time, while at the same time also accessing content in the core content areas, right? Unlike their English peers. So we know from research it takes probably 5 to 7 years minimum to really acquire that language proficiency and to be able to access that learning. So the MCAs are not really the best measure of their academic achievement. So that's why you see more of the lower end of the scores with the MCAs. And in past data, once EL students exit, they actually perform even better than most students, including our high-performing white students in Minneapolis Public Schools. So in the past, the historical trend has been that way after 5 to 7 years of exiting. Specifically for accessing these Spanish language materials, right now the math programs we have, we started introducing the new math curriculum, and it has a companion books for the Spanish language program, and those are being offered to our schools, and they're able to do that. And we had PD in the summer where they were trained on those materials, and so we look forward for that to be utilized. And for benchmark, which is the literacy program, we also have the benchmark at the length for Spanish-speaking students, or for schools that are dual language Spanish instruction. So So we do have those materials, and when we are adopting curriculum, we make a strong look into how those materials are incorporated for our students.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Director Ellison?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this presentation. Director Hunter, thank you for mentioning the adoption, the math adoption, curriculum adoption, because when I looked at this, I thought, well, we did just create, adopt that new curriculum, and so I was hoping that that had some impact. But my question is around the reading. When I first looked at the summary of the reading for our language groups and how our language groups were holding steady or increasing, except our native Spanish speakers. And then I remembered a discussion we had about enrollment and how our largest group of enrollment was native Spanish speakers. And so I wondered if that had some type of impact on this. But then we heard from parents tonight who were concerned about the literacy for their students in both Spanish and English. And so it seems to be something that's coming up that we seem to be aware of. And so hoping we have a plan for that. So thank you.
Yeah, Director Ellison, I believe we're finding a few gaps with our reading through our reading, through our literacy curriculum, with our reading literacy curriculum audit. And so, Dr. Fearing, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about the audit and what we found, and that will be starting that new process.
All right, thank you, Director Ellison, for the question. Two things that come to mind. Yes, we did the audit, and we found that it did not meet our standards of where we'd want a K-5 literacy curriculum to be. That is also aligned to what we're hearing from the state as we move through the READ Act and being able to go through a list of curriculum that they would also approve of. And so, yes, with the audit moving forward, we'll be looking for a new K-5. I think in response to the reading data in our native Spanish speakers, I heard that question as well. I think it's twofold. I think one might be the impact of enrollment of new to country students or students who've been in the country less than 2 or 3 years, for example, on the MCAs. I think it also speaks to putting up against our students in English language proficiency if they've started at a dual language site when they're totally in Spanish. So if you're a native English speaker and you're going to a dual language site and most of your instruction is in Spanish, right? I mean, you probably have English at home, but that's also going to impact then when you're looking at MCAs in the 3rd grade. So really what I'm trying to say is when you're looking at the MCAs outcomes for 3rd grade, it doesn't represent the language acquisition trend that we have in our dual language sites. It doesn't match. What you want to see is later, maybe 5th grade or so, it should even out, but the way that we do the priority of instruction in which language, it's not necessarily going to be on par if you are a native English speaker and getting your instruction in English, right? And then you look at the opposite side, you have your native Spanish speakers who are in a dual language program and they're really getting the Spanish and the Spanish literacy and language arts, et cetera. But again, that's not going to be on par as if they were then to take the MCA in Spanish, which they do not offer for MCA reading, right? So I think you're looking at a few unique pieces here. However, I would say, though, that as we look for our K-5 literacy curriculum, and obviously we will have a requirement that we have that same curriculum in Spanish as well, like we do now with Benchmark and Adelante, that we're really going to be looking for assessments that progress monitor both English and Spanish, and you're looking at that the students are making the trajectory based on what you should be when you're in a dual language site. So that would be part of the RFP as we look for the K-5 curriculum.
Thank you, and I'm looking forward to seeing that growth data over the year. So thank you.
Thank you. Our student representative, Abdullah.
Hi, thank you so much for the slides. They were amazing and really, really pretty. I like that. So this is a question for both the board and Ms. Hunter. Are you Dr. Hunter or Ms. Hunter? Okay, just making sure. Do you know? Director. Oh, Director Hunter. Okay, no? Yes. What have educators said about what they need from the district to improve the scores? And also, when looking at the slides, I didn't see any like previous or future predictions or goals for these test scores. And I was wondering why weren't they included? Maybe they don't exist. I was wondering just about that.
One, thank you for the questions. So your first question related to like how do we know, right, what educators are saying they need in order to support growth for students? And I think one of the things that has felt really clear, especially post-pandemic, so I want to acknowledge that we had a lot of work to do in order to serve all of our students well pre-pandemic, and the pandemic exacerbated that, right? So it didn't create inequities in our system. It highlighted them and it made them, right, more significant. And so one of the things that we have been hearing from teachers, I have a connection to schools through the school improvement team. They're supporting the schools that qualified for support and improvement based on their student needs. And one of the things that we hear pretty commonly is that in order to meet the needs of all of the students in a particular classroom, there isn't enough time in the day to plan all the different groupings or individualized, lessons that would need to be provided in order to do right by students. And as a teacher, you think about like that you went into it in order to serve your students' needs, right? And that in many cases, I think our teachers are feeling like, one, they needed additional materials. So I think Dr. Fearing and her team have been building out over the past number of years supplemental materials, particularly at the elementary level for literacy. And that is both because we saw student need and because teachers were asking for it. I think we also, in the rolling out of the math curriculum last year, one of the things that we did is to get feedback from teachers throughout the year, right? Like what's working, did the PD actually support you in implementing the curriculum? I think the same will need to be true. What you're hearing thus far as a high school student is elementary stuff, and that's because this year we're moving on to secondary math, so we want to hear the same thing from high school math educators. And I think also acknowledging that at the high school level, the gap in what students know in a classroom gets even larger, right? It's sort of with every year in our system, as we don't serve all of our students well, the gaps widen. So I think one of the things that feels really positive now is that we have a structure built out in our secondary schools for intervention for students who we have failed to serve over years. And that is something that high school teachers have been asking for quite some time, is like support for students who they aren't able to meet their needs in a 50-minute period. Your second question was about setting goals. So I think that's a really great question. In our strategic plan, we have targets, but they are not based on the MCA because we chose to use that universal screener because we can see more progress throughout the year. So I'd be happy to do in our November presentation when we talk about the strategic plan, I'll make sure we go back over those goals so that one, they're clear to the public, but also for this group and anybody watching. Thank you for the questions.
Thank you. Director Abdi?
One follow-up kind of request is the MCA ELL also. The numbers are low, but I like to see the participation of the total students of ELL, and what level of ELL they are in. So in case if we only capturing the first-year students, the numbers are not really true reflect of the MCA. And that's just for what I like to observe. Like if we get this kind of number, then we need to have some explanation of like, okay, the 20% of students just chose to participate, and those numbers behind it.
Thank you for that. And what I could just offer is that we'll begin to add the percents and the numbers of students to our presentations moving forward, so that question is just that the data is present. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Director Surreal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. I'm going to be very honest. I feel very overwhelmed, very sad, very frustrated. So looking at this presentation, I don't know, do we have this information broken down school by school? Can you share that with the board at some point? Because I feel it will be up to the associate superintendents to understand what their responsibilities are in regards to providing the support to their schools. That would be number one. We need to know where is the most needed schools, right, in the district. So I'm just trying to process everything. I'm just torn in here. This question will be for you, Superintendent Cox. How are we communicating this to our families? Because at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we inform our families where we stand, and also to help them to be part of the solution, right? So that we can bring volunteers to our schools and reach out to community. We are in a crisis, and we need to be transparent and be very mindful that whether we want to or not, these state requirement tests are part of our children's to get access to higher education. So that's my question. How are we going to be presenting this information to our families?
Yeah, Director Sorillo, so in your first piece, I just wanted to comment to say, as we look at what schools need support more, that was really what the intervention triads were built on. So when we did intervention triads, we didn't say every school gets one triad or two triad, but we really looked at the growth data, and we looked at students who were not making growth and were not proficient, and those are the ones that got intervention triads. And some schools got one triad, some schools got up to 4 triads based on their students' needs. So that's another data point that we can share with you to look at how schools, we differentiate the support across there. As far as the information for families, one of the places that we do that, of course, is conferences. So it's really important that, and I think Sarah Hunter's team does a very good job of saying, how do we present MCA data to families and how do we present growth data, right? Because they're very different, proficiency versus growth. And so that is and Director Hunter, you might share a little bit about how your team helps teachers present that data to families.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So one, we are responsible for making sure we share MCA scores. So those are shared online with families in the parent portal. But the other thing that I think Interim Superintendent Cox was referring to, so it's an expectation at fall conferences that every family, every caregiver of a student receives their fall FAST data, and that should have a graph. So my team creates a line graph that shows progress over time in all of the times that child has taken the FAST test, and shows sort of similar to what Student Representative Abdullah was looking for, is like, what's the goal, right? So there are lines that show where we want them to be in terms of proficient and what the trend line is. And the expectation is that that's shared at fall conferences, and then followed up on in the spring. There should be winter data that is shared, and that allows a parent to see growth over time and not just, is my child proficient or not proficient. Those per student reports are provided prior to conferences every year to be handed out at conferences. Also, I want to share, I know you asked a question about school-by-school data, Director Sorillo. The public Tableau dashboard, which I can just make sure gets reshared out with this group, does have our MCA data available on it, and you can toggle by school. So it's the public-facing Tableau page. I can make sure that gets to everybody.
Thank you. I do have, I don't know if it is a question or just a follow-up comment. I understand that we provide that information one-on-one, but when I see the students whose home language is Spanish going from 14% to 11%, I feel that as a district, specifically, we need to be informing and perhaps working with the Latin academic director. I mean, this is something that my community needs to know. This is really alarming. So just waiting until the conferences is just not good enough for me. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple questions I have around the data that was shared here myself. Again, when looking at, I'm not really a data person. I want to see the growth. I want to be able to tell what's working in a classroom. I want to know what our students are bringing home to their families. So I guess my question would be centered around, I understand we have to be patient in the process when we're talking about different things we're bringing into the district, but I'm looking at from a curriculum standpoint. When do we know, or when do we take a deeper dive to see, is this the curriculum that we need to help our children to grow, to be able to advance, and to be able to comprehend the proficiency that we want them to see? I think, again, sometimes I don't want us to continue to wait, I'll put it that way. And then every year is another year that we've let get by us. So what are we doing as a district to where, as a board director, I can feel comfortable with knowing that we are doing what we can do for our students, for our families, to get them that growth that they need when it comes to reading?
I'm going to start, and then Dr. Farian, I'll turn it over to you. I think for our math curriculum we're starting year 2. We saw some nice growth, so I think we're feeling really optimistic about that as we move forward. For our reading curriculum, completed an audit last year. This year we'll be starting an RFP process for a new reading curriculum. We found gaps, not satisfied with the curriculum as it is right now. Also doesn't comply with the READ Act, so we need to make a change there. We're going to make it immediately as we go through the process, make sure we get engagement from the community as we move through. I think the other piece for that is our interventions, and we have solidified what those interventions are. All the intervention triads, staff have been trained on them. I think that's another piece. We've also added functional phonics this year as another strategy for an interim until we have the new reading curriculum. Dr. Farian, I probably just rattled through those and you would have said them much more eloquently, but those are the things that that come to mind for me.
Oh, you did a great job, Superintendent Alan Cox. So thank you for the question, Chair Elamine. So let's take apart literacy just a little bit, right? So when we're looking at why are we not seeing proficiency scores make huge jumps or huge gains? Like, why are we okay with 11% or 20%? And why are we okay with it only going up 2%? And so my response to that is really, it will, but I think the underlying expectation is you should be able to see student growth week to week. Like, it should not be a mystery or having to wait till the MCA scores to see if a student has made growth or not, right? So I think about our students in K-1-2, right? So they would receive press interventions. It's very scripted, it's very timely, and it's very detailed to the student based on the diagnostic. They also, for schools who've chosen functional phonics, that's taking their knowledge of how students learn to decode in the word recognition phase, and it's also taking that a step further of how do you implement and then attach the differentiation within the core. So before intervention, but differentiation in the core. And then we do have some schools with Groves. And when I met with Groves, I did ask them that. I said, so when your coaches go in and work with teachers, is it an expectation that a teacher should see weekly growth? Or is it monthly? Or is it bi-monthly? Like, what should they be able to see? And with the assessments they use in Groves, they should be able to track a student making, I mean, it's going to be small growth, right? But small growth adds up to bigger growth, and then that adds eventually up to proficiency. So with my thoughts on the proficiency phase, yes, we're not going to see huge, like 20% gains. I mean, if we did, then I would almost question the test, right? Because it wouldn't seem, I mean, maybe it's possible, but in my mind, it's more what we should be asking is in the classroom per student, is each student making adequate weekly growth in terms of their weekly or formative assessments that the teachers are giving? In the intervention program that we have pressed, they have the opportunity to look for that. In functional phonics and in Groves, they also have the ability to monitor the core on a weekly basis. So that's the piece that when we did professional development in August, staff had full day literacy and infinite campus training. And then the other day they had on math. So that was on the bridges and number corner. And our second year is really focusing on that differentiation and intervention, resources and materials for bridges and number corner. So when I go to building, I was in a lot of buildings this first week. I walked into classrooms, I was looking to see how they were set up first and foremost. So looking at, do they have the number corner set up? What do their literacy spaces look like? Can I see how teachers have made the shift from it being leveled reading, leveled and guided and balanced reading, to having more decodable text, for example, phonics-based, etc. I also looked at the materials to see, are they really working with phonemic awareness? Are they linking the sounds to what they're teaching with letter identification? And you can see a lot just walking into a room before even having to talk to the teacher. But then also talking to the teacher and saying, okay, what are we doing today? What is the lesson on literacy today? And I have heard a big difference on how our primary teachers are explaining how they're doing literacy than 4 years ago when I took this position, right? I also walk, this is weird, I know, but I also walk into the storage closets, in the curriculum storage, and I'm like, what is still here? Like, if there are things that are still accessible to teachers that we know is not scientifically based, evidence-based, culturally responsive, yes, I did have a conversation with one of the principals. I said, we got to send a team out and clear this out. Because if it's sitting here, it's saying that it's okay for teachers or educators to grab and use with their students, right? This is not the direction we're going with guided reading and leveled readers. They don't need to be here. And so I think when you put all those things together, my expectation is, if I go to a school and look at a first grade team, what growth has every student made? And then that should then filter into quarterly, yearly, and then eventually affect the MCAs. But I have been pleasantly surprised these first 2 weeks. As I've been in a lot of schools, I actually was prepping to teach kindergarten this morning at Bethune. And so I got access to the lesson plans. So I was looking at what the teacher had written for what they were doing during literacy block, what they were going to do during math block. And I'm sure the teacher didn't know I was actually looking for certain things. But again, there was evidence of what we have been going through in professional development and looking at the trend and sequencing of how we teach phonics. So, I think all those combined, we should see. I mean, I wish I could tell the future, totally, but I can't. But what I can say is from what I've seen these first 2 weeks, based on the professional development that we gave last year and this year in terms of core and intervention with press, there has been a big change in instruction.
So is it yearly that you would take a look at the different curriculums that are being presented and used in the classroom, or is it every 2 years, 3 years? What's the time frame around?
Yeah, good
when
question.
you take a deeper dive into it?
It should be every year, to be honest, because things change really fast. The actual process of auditing an entire curriculum is usually every 5 years. But it doesn't mean that every year you don't do an evaluation, because publishers and research and science and cognitive scientists, etc., they come up with a lot of new things or discoveries. And so you don't wait 5 years to say, okay, now we're going to find something to match that, right? So there's new addendums or supplemental pieces. I know Benchmark put out a lot of supplemental pieces after 2018. And so those are the pieces that you would then choose to bring in if you find that after a yearly evaluation, it's just not, you'd make the decision, are we going to get the supplemental or are we going to move on to something else?
Okay, thank you. That's what I was looking for.
Oh, I'm sorry. I took the long way around to answer your question.
And then my next question would be around the parent portal that we use. We still use parent portal. Is that available in all languages? And then again, how often is it updated? If I am a parent and I'm trying to track my students' growth, how often is parent portal looked at, and is it in all languages?
Thank you for the question, Chair Elamine, Superintendent Cox, board directors, and those in the MPS community. The parent portal is available, and you can switch the languages. It's available in our 4 languages. And it is updated instantly as data is entered into the system by teachers and administrators. So as soon as that data is entered into that portal, it will reflect on the other end once an action is taken to enter an assignment or a grade.
So follow up behind that, are our teachers required to do it weekly, daily? How often are they required to enter that data?
We encourage them to enter it continuously as they receive assignments and take attendance and do other actions in the classroom.
Okay, thank you. Last question, Director Emmerich, and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Chair. Quickly, I just want to thank you, Dr. Fearing, for that. Y'all know that I am a big fan of the Street Data Framework by Jamila Dugan and Shane Saphir, and that is exactly the type of narrative, ground level data that I find really valuable. I know that we have different types of data that we really like and find most useful. So thank you so much. I would love more of that. I would love updates on your learning walks, what you're seeing in classrooms. I really appreciate that so much. My question is, Interim Superintendent Cox, you've brought up the intervention triads, which you know I'm a fan of, a couple of times now when we're talking about how we, are currently addressing some of the literacy needs of our students who are having the most difficulty achieving growth. But my question is, I know I was a really big fan of particularly the formula used to determine where we really needed to deploy the most triads, the highest number of people. I know that I really like the looking at both the students who aren't making growth as expected and the students who are behind where we would want them to be. However, I am hearing that we may not actually be seeing those triads deployed to the schools where they're most needed because of some of our hiring difficulties and vacancies. And I'm wondering, my number one is if I could just get, and again, I don't expect exact numbers, but if I could get more of a high-level narrative about what we're seeing in terms of, are we deploying our interventionists to the schools that where we identified the highest need? Where are these folks right now? And number two, and I wish I would have thought of to ask this question back several months ago, and I'm just thinking of it now, so my apologies to my constituents, but when we posted these literacy interventionist positions, were they site-specific or were they a pool so that we could deploy them then where they were most needed?
So the intervention triads are both reading and math. That is a school-based decision, depending on what they need. The intervention triads are all, the allocations live within each school budget. So there's not a point where we say, oh, everybody switch and go over here, everybody switch. What was put in the budget tie-out, what interventions they need were there back in the spring. Right now, we have, as you've heard from many of us, we've been out in schools. It's kind of all hands on deck as we start to fill positions and the vacancies start to reduce. So we have had interventionists, and Sarah Hunter and I spent some time with the interventionists on their professional development day, thanking them who are actually in classrooms, because there's no use doing intervention if you don't have someone teaching core. So as we see those numbers, as the teachers get hired, we see them being able to go back to their intervention triad place. So we have some schools that have intervention triads who are up and running and going. Others might be delayed. One of their triads, two of their triads might be delayed. We are right now getting that information ourselves, and we'll be happy to share that with the board as we're looking, as we move through. We actually had a meeting today where we were talking about, where are we, as you know, and we continue to say the data is moving really fast. And so getting a point in time as we look at how positions are filled and when they're filled, we're getting information by the hour at schools as we're looking at what supports we can pull back because positions are being filled and which positions are still vacant. So we can for sure get you that data.
Okay, quick follow-up, and then I'm happy to hear from you, Director Hunter. Do we have, as MPS leadership, a mechanism that we can utilize, that's within our power to utilize, and that we will utilize to make sure that the schools with the highest identified need when this program was being designed have all of their literacy folks in place before the schools with the lowest identified need?
It's a really good question, and I think it's one we'd actually discussed today, so it should have been at our meeting, because you're asking the same questions we're asking ourselves, right, as we look at this dilemma. We're kind of in uncharted territory, so it's kind of the first time we've looked at intervention, we've ever had intervention positions. So as we look at that, we've got to get that data, and then we're working with Senior Officer Miller, because of course there's contractual issues as we move forward. We do have a mechanism called staffing adjustment, so as we talked through today, we're kind of looking at what does that look like. We know how that works with teachers as we move them, and you know we're hopeful that enrollment we're actually seeing an increase. So how staffing adjustment is going to work, it's all in the next couple weeks. We'll be utilizing several different tools to make sure that kids have what they need as we move forward.
Thank you. That's great. And let's make sure as we answer that question for ourselves, in partnership with HR, thank you, over the next couple of weeks, let's make sure we communicate that answer out to our community, our public, okay?
Thank you. Director Abdi, did you have a final question?
Just one follow-up with that topic is like, do we have the actual number of the teachers who chose to do the intervention left in the classroom, and if we really backfilled all the classrooms that they left?
Yes, Director Abdi, I think we put that in last week's board update for you. We gave you an update on that. I can resend that for you.
No, I assume there was still some.
Yeah, there are still some that are still vacant. I don't have those exact numbers for you as we look at the classrooms. I believe we had, and you want to just tell me? 24.
Still 24.
That are open? Yeah.
Alrighty, thank you, Director Hunter, Superintendent Cox, for all the information here tonight. Thank you. Next, we'll move to our action items, beginning with the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes routine items that do not involve major policy, budget, or taxing decision, bond awards, or items related to the superintendent's contract or evaluation. Director Abdi, will you please move approval of these items?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Approval of the consent agenda has been moved and second. Is there any discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. That motion carries and the consent agenda is approved. The next item is the pre-certification of the property tax levy, which at the recommendation of the Finance Committee, Senior Officer of Finance and Operation and Interim Superintendent, is for the maximum amount allowed by the state. School districts are required to pre-certify prior to September 30th of each year. After receiving public comments, we will set the final levy at our December business meeting, which will also serve as the Truth in Taxation meeting. Director Abdi, can I please get a motion to approve this resolution, which is labeled as 2023-0059?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Approval of the resolution pre-certifying the property tax levy labeled as Resolution 2023-0059 has been moved and second. Is there any discussion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The motion carried and the item is approved. We actually will jump right into our final item this evening, which is time for directors to give a brief update on the committees they chair or are appointed to, or to provide a quick update about any other board-related activities. Directors, if you have comments you want to share, please hit the request to speak and we'll run through them quickly. Director Jordan.
Thank you, Chair Chair Ellison, Chair Elamine. Sorry. First off, I just want to say thank you to everyone for having a good start to the school year. I know there's still some bumps in the road and stuff, so to speak, but also too, I just want to make sure people did get some rest and relaxation over the summertime, which is always very short. And thank you, Superintendent, for mentioning maybe possibly looking at the calendar. I know I've been harping about that too for a while. But a couple of quick things. I will be hosting coffee hours starting here next Friday. It'll be every 2 weeks for the rest of the school year, September 22nd from 9:30 to 11 at Turtle Bread Company over on 44th and Beard. And in the next 2 weeks will be October 6th from 9:30 to 11 at Shortwave Coffee on 50th and Bryant. And I'll alternate those 2 spots every other Friday. And you do not need to live in District 6 to come by and say hi and chat. So please stop by. Generally, it is generally a good turnout. People from all over the city do stop by and say hi, concerns, comments, whatnot. And other board members, if you happen to be in the area, stop on by too. Once in a while, I've had other people show up in the past, like Director Gagnon, et cetera. Also too, while we do have free lunch and breakfast and stuff like that, please continue to fill out your application for educational benefits. They are still counted. We still need to fill those out for our school. We still draw funding from those. So please continue to fill those out. And I say this every year, and I said this at National Night Out. Even if you think you might be over income, please fill that out anyways, because reduced also still qualifies for funding. So please fill that out. Even if you know you're over income, fill it out anyways. It takes literally not even 5 minutes. It is important. It also helps our numbers, overall numbers of completed forms. So please fill that out. Generally, that window closes around mid to end November. So it is imperative. Please fill that out. District-wide, it does affect every single student, programming, staffing levels, et cetera, et cetera. One last thing I wanted to mention really quickly is that, we had an Encryption Aware event this past February, and I know much to the chagrin of a lot of people, it did affect a lot of our students, it affected a lot of our parents, it affected a lot of our staff. And recently, a lot of letters have gone out to staff and parents and students across this district. I happen to be one of them, and my children also happen to be affected by this. So I just wanted to say that to the parents that are watching and staff and students, if you're frustrated and angry and hurt or whatever, I want you to know that at least one school board member identifies the feelings that you and your children and your family and your staff, if you're a staff member, are going through. It is not easy. It is not a very fun process to have to go through this for your children or for yourself. And I am personally committed to making sure that our children's identification and our security upgrades are to the best of our ability. We are not the only school district in this country that are facing issues like this. We are not. There are bigger issues, or there are bigger facilities like the university systems across the country are also facing this. But here on the local level, I want to share in my frustration with people who do nefarious things such as this. So you are not alone. I am one of those parents that are affected, and so are my children. And I am livid and sorrowful and full of sorrow for my kids. And I promise each and every one of you that I will make sure that our superintendent and our IT staff have every tool at their disposal to make sure that this does not happen again, because it is completely unacceptable. And again, if you have gotten a letter, I highly suggest you use and take the advice of what is included in that letter, because it is very imperative, and I cannot stress the importance of it, to protect yourself and your children and any other information that may have been compromised. And wow, I can't think of anything positive to end with, but welcome back to the school year.
Thank you.
That's about it, really. That's it. That's all I got.
Director Norville.
Thank you. I'll start with the policy committee update. We will meet, next week already at 4:30 on September, that's in 2 weeks. On September 25th, in 2 weeks, we will meet. In addition to conducting regular policy reviews, we'll continue our work of reviewing policies that may need revisions as a result of recent legislative changes. We will also hear an update on the implementation of the site council policy. And then I have one more update about the superintendent search. If y'all haven't heard, we're in the midst of a superintendent search. Applications went live on September 5th, and they will be live until November 5th when they are closed. The applications will go to the consulting firm BWP, and the information is located on our website. You can also find the timeline there. We have formed a task force, and on that task force, we have 3 board directors, Director Cirio, Director Abdi, and myself. The remaining directors will appoint community members from their district. If the remaining directors happen to be an at-large director, they will appoint from one of the districts already on the task force. We will have 6 community members, 6 staff members, including 2 principals, 2 teachers, and 2 ESPs. I'm just going over this in case y'all missed the superintendent search meeting. The timeline and leadership profile are on the website, and we have this amazing QR code that will take you right to it. So all directors, I believe you have copies of this in your folder, so please use these out in the community. People can scan this, and it will take them directly to the superintendent search on the MPS website. Thank you.
Director Abdi?
Yeah, for the finance meeting will be next Tuesday. The 5 board members that are with me, and that's my notification. I attended all the school openings for my area, most of them, the ones I could do it, and it was really welcoming and great year. We're looking forward. One thing I am working with my board, park board kind of initiative is we would like to have it. I talked to Superintendent Cox about the Northeast Middle School have an extreme excellent swimming pool, and it's not being used. And I'm working with the board, Minneapolis Park Board, to kind out if we can have it some training or something. It's very initial. I haven't started yet, but it's something that I like to see it with the disparity of swimming in my area and so many other. That school has majority black and brown students in grade 6. 4 or 5 years ago, they used to have swimming classes in the school. And one of the benefits was my daughter also. The last 5 years, they did not have it. The swimming is absolutely in excellent condition, and I'm trying to revive that one, and I'm working on that.
Thank you. Director Ellison?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just real quick, I wanted to mention that yesterday was a kickoff to a memorandum agreement between the district and the Native community, just to highlight the support that we provide each other. And so that real quick, and then I also wanted to mention a couple weeks ago, I attended a Raise the Bar webinar that's about providing high quality dual language programming for all students. It's not the only one they're gonna hold, but they had so much, like 2 hours long, and there's so much information. I'm looking forward to going through it. I'm still processing and sharing it with staff. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Cirio?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had the opportunity of attending Ella Baker's open house, and I want to thank Ms. Julia Pringle and also Great Minnesota Schools, because we were able to feed over 400 people pizza, drinks, and chips, and it was beautiful. It was really beautiful, refreshing to be around our young kids and our families. We did have some challenges, not enough interpreters, so I stepped in to volunteer and helped out. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Beachy?
Yeah, same thing. Welcome back, everybody. Director Fearing, I think this is the first time in 8 years I had to start off a school year without seeing your face at the back to school presentation. So it's, so it's a little bit of an adjustment for me this year. But and so, you know, my school year started the same as Minneapolis's did, so I wasn't able to get to any first week of school things, but I was able to stop over at a bunch of schools the week before and try to talk to a bunch of teachers and administrators when they were there. Spent an awful lot of time over at South talking about some of their issues that they have going on. Director Jourdain, as I just said, worked in the district for 8 years, so I wasn't surprised, but I got my letter too. So yeah, it's frustrating, and it's frustrating. So, but hang in there. Also on that point, I do want to say nice job though to Justin and his team for all of that. for all the work you had to do for such a small department, for such a huge problem, and to get nothing but criticism, criticism, criticism. Make sure you understand that there was a lot of support behind you from up here as well. Last thing I want to share with you, Director Norville and I sat down with Senator Mohammed and Representative Sencer-Mura, and we just kind of were talking about wanting to do some things down in the area, down south, meet and greet and community town halls and whatever. Next thing you know, they got it set up, and a couple days later, we're sitting down with the chairs from the K-12 committee. So we were able to have that meeting. I know Josh was a little bit like, what do you mean you're meeting with them? It's like, it's just a meet and greet kind of a thing. But it was very helpful to get to talk with them. We let them know a little bit about what their what some of the new things that they were able to put through this last year, how that's going to affect Minneapolis Public Schools, what some of the directions are that we're starting to think about moving forward. And in terms of, based on kind of the discussion that we were talking about today, the student representative asked about what the teachers need. And so one thing that I think that we're also talking to them about is that they need to go to talk to the Higher Education Committee and make sure that our teachers are being prepared even before they get here, and making sure that they have that reading knowledge and that they have that math knowledge before they start, so that we're not the ones who have to teach that to them. That needs to be prepared right from the start. So that's some of the conversations that we just kind of, just real brief ones that we had. We just kind of wanted to open that door, say hello, here's who we are. It was a great meeting, and I'm actually real excited to keep working with them. So it was I'm sure if all of you followed around, it was I was pretty proud of our legislature, to be honest with you. So I'm excited to be working for them, or working with them, and I know they've got some more big visions moving forward, and they want us to be a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just share very quickly here the different things that has been going on. Very excited about the first initiative of showing our strategic plan and work with being able to get the buses for North High School. It was just one way, again, that we show the safety concerns, but also the culture and what the school needed. That we are listening, we hear you, we know. It's very challenging to try to make sure that all of our schools have what they need, but we hear you and we are working towards that. And also, just again, around the superintendent search, that we are moving right along with you, the community, with our parents in regards to the superintendent search. So as we move forward, as Director Norville, who is actually the chair for the superintendent search, mentioned, we will continue to keep the community abreast of what's happening, and we will definitely make sure that those town hall meetings and different things are taking place. We don't have to wait. As you all can see, that the board members are now waiting. We're each taking our own initiative and making sure that we bring our community along with us. Also around the school transformation, we are definitely moving together, again, with community. There has been no actions taken towards school closure. We are looking at school transformation within our district. Community will be brought along with every step that we take along that way. So I just want to reassure that, again, because we heard it from community, but we are moving and we're bringing you along with us. But as a board here, we want to make sure that we move together within our community. So again, welcome back. We look forward to a very successful year. Lots of different challenges, but we feel like we are equipped and that we are ready and prepared to take them on to do what's needed by our school district and our parents. So thank you all. That concludes our agenda for the evening. Our next meeting will be the Committee of the Whole on Tuesday, September 26th at 6 p.m. right here in the boardroom. And without objection, I will now adjourn the meeting. Good night, everyone.